Welcome to my channel. Support our channel by subscribing. Your subscription helps us grow and create more intriguing content like this. Now let's dive into today's story. Title: How My Wife's Affair with My Boss Nearly Cost Me My Job and My Marriage. Liam. A 32-year-old marketing manager is the main character. He's hardworking, intelligent, and dedicated to his career and family. His life seems perfect. He has a stable job, a loving wife, and a home they've worked hard to build together. But recently, his marriage with Sophia has started to show cracks. Liam spends long hours at work, and although he loves his wife, they've drifted apart. Sophia. Liam's wife is a beautiful and ambitious woman in her late 20s. Sophia had once been the supportive, loving partner Liam knew and cherished. But as time passed, she began feeling unsatisfied with her life and wanted more excitement, more attention. That's when she met Capper David, Liam's boss. David is charismatic, powerful, and always seems to have everything under control. He's a man who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to take it. David. The boss is a charming, successful man in his mid-40s. He's been with the company for over a decade and knows how to manipulate situations in his favor. David quickly took notice of Sophia, and what started as casual flirtation soon became a dangerous game of seduction. It all began one ordinary evening after work. Liam had spent an exhausting day dealing with a high-pressure presentation. He came home late, expecting to find Sophia waiting for him as usual in their cozy living room. But instead of a warm embrace, he was met with an empty house. Her car was gone. Liam didn't think much of it at first. Sophia had been distant lately, always busy with her own activities and interests. But something felt off that night. He checked his phone and saw a notification. Sophia tagged in a photo by David. Curious, Liam clicked on the photo. It was a picture of Sophia and David, looking too close for comfort, at a recent work event. David had his arm around her waist, and Sophia was laughing in a way that made Liam feel uneasy. The caption read, "Great time at the conference. Work hard, play hard." Liam tried to brush off the feeling in his gut. It was probably nothing. But as the night wore on, doubts began to gnaw at him. Why was Sophia spending so much time with David lately? Was it just work? Or was there something more? The next few days were a blur of work and tension at home. Sophia became more secretive, always hiding her phone or making excuses when Liam asked about her day. But the final straw came when Liam discovered the truth. One night, as he was putting away some paperwork, his hand brushed against a slip of paper that had been stuck underneath a stack of documents. It was an email printout. The subject line: "Last night was perfect." Liam's heart raced as he skimmed through the message. The email was from David to Sophia, and it wasn't business-related. In fact, it was far from it. It was an invitation for another secret meeting, filled with seductive language and promises of more fun in the future. Liam's world came crashing down. He was shaking, unable to comprehend what he was reading. His wife, the woman he had loved for years, was having an affair with his boss. His entire life, the trust he had built with her, was all a lie. Liam couldn't hold it in anymore. He called Sophia at work, demanding to meet her after hours. The anger and betrayal in his voice were undeniable. When they met, Sophia immediately knew something was wrong. "Liam, what's going on? You sound upset," she said, but Liam didn't give her a chance to explain. He pulled out the email printout and shoved it in front of her face. "I know about you and David," Liam said through gritted teeth. "How long has this been going on, Sophia?" Sophia's face turned white as she backed away. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't deny it. She had been caught. "Please, Liam, let me explain," she began, her voice trembling. "It was a mistake. It wasn't supposed to happen. David, he made me feel special, wanted. You've been so distant lately, and I didn't know how to handle it. Liam could barely contain his fury. So you thought sleeping with my boss was the solution? Did you even think about me, about us? Sophia was silent. She knew she had crossed a line she could never uncross. But her guilt was no match for the rage building inside Liam. How could you? He repeated, his voice shaking. I thought I could trust you. And David, he's my boss, Sophia. My career is on the line, and you put all of that in jeopardy. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but Liam could barely look at her. He was no longer sure who she was. The woman he had married seemed like a stranger now. The fallout from the affair was even more disastrous than Liam could have imagined, as if dealing with the heartbreak. Heartbreak wasn't enough. David, knowing the affair had been exposed, used his position of power to sabotage Liam's career. David started subtly undermining Liam at work, questioning his decisions during meetings, and even hinting to HR that Liam's performance was slipping due to personal issues. Liam was blindsided. The company he had worked so hard for now seemed to be slipping through his fingers, all because of David's influence and the affair with his wife. Liam knew he had to act fast. He couldn't let David destroy everything he had worked for. But confronting his boss would be dangerous. He had no proof of what David was doing, just his gut feeling that David was using the affair as leverage. Determined to protect his job, Liam began documenting every interaction with David. He started recording conversations, keeping a log of the subtle but damaging remarks made by David during meetings. Liam also went to HR and voiced his concerns, carefully presenting his case without directly accusing David of sabotage. Weeks went by, and Liam was on edge, unsure of what would happen next. Every meeting felt like a battle. His marriage was falling apart, and his career was hanging by a thread. The tension came to a head during a major corporate presentation. David, as usual, was in charge, but Liam had worked hard on his part of the presentation, determined to prove himself. Just as they were about to begin, David made a pointed remark about Liam's presentation slides, publicly questioning his ability to perform under pressure. Liam had had enough. He stood up, facing David in front of the whole room, his voice steady but full of conviction. David, I know what you're doing, and I won't let you ruin my career. If you think I'll stay silent while you manipulate the situation, you're wrong. The room went silent. David's face darkened, and for a moment, it seemed like a confrontation was imminent. But instead of backing down, Liam pushed forward. He pulled out his phone and played a recording of a private conversation between David and HR, where David had subtly implied that Liam's performance had been negatively affected by personal issues, despite Liam's excellent track record. David's face turned crimson as the evidence became clear. HR immediately took action, and within days, David was removed from his position. It wasn't just Liam's job that was saved, it was his dignity. He had stood up for himself and fought back. As for Sophia, their marriage was left in ruins. After David's downfall, she tried to reach out, asking for forgiveness. But Liam knew that the betrayal was too much to overcome. I don't know who you are anymore, Liam told her quietly. You chose this life over everything we built together. I can't live with that. Sophia, devastated by the loss of both her husband and her career, moved out and started over. Liam, though heartbroken, felt a sense of closure. It was a painful process, but he had learned that sometimes you have to fight for yourself, not just for your career, but for your own peace of mind. Liam's life gradually returned to a sense of normalcy. He focused on his career, rebuilding his reputation, and eventually found love again with someone who truly appreciated him. His journey was a painful one, but it taught him that, even in the darkest moments, you have the power to rise above. Thank you so much for watching today's story. Betrayal is never easy to deal with, especially when it affects both your heart and your career. Have you ever experienced something like this? How did you handle it? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing stories. Thanks again for watching, and remember, sometimes the hardest battles are the ones that shape us the most.
Vividly recall the officiant at our wedding, surrounded by 300 guests, 7 bridesmaids and groomsmen, and $20,000 worth of flowers, asking, "Do you, Jamie Elizabeth Snowden, take Blake William Benson to be your lawful husband, forsaking all others until death do you part?" Her affirmative response, accompanied by a loving look, felt like a promise of fidelity. I made a similar commitment, gazing at her with the same sincerity. I've always believed Jamie and I make a great team because we share similar life goals and interests. Yet our differences keep our relationship dynamic. Jamie's lifelong involvement in sports showcases her competitive spirit, whereas I prefer a more laid-back approach, favoring consensus over competition. Despite my athletic build, I've never pursued sports with the same passion. Jamie is also more outgoing, forming numerous casual friendships, while I, an ambivert, enjoy social activities but prefer a few deep, meaningful connections, reflecting my upbringing in a wealthy, well-mannered family. Jamie received an excellent education from one of the best colleges in the eastern United States and landed a job as a sales representative for a pharmaceutical company. She got this high-paying job not only because of her education and intelligence, but also her appearance. It seems that Big Pharma wants attractive people to call on hospitals and doctors, perhaps to distract them from the fact that they are being coerced with money. In any case, since Jamie is 5'7" inches tall, weighs 120 pounds, has long blonde hair, a winning smile, and sparkling, almost neon green eyes, she was very successful, so much so that she secured the right to sell pills in her territory. Jamie explained, "The reason why my territory requires me to be away from our luxury apartment 3 nights a week, or occasionally on weekends, is related to the fact that the main pill I was responsible for had a limited but very lucrative market. Although I don't fully understand this, I don't like that she's gone 3 nights a week, not to mention some weekends. I'm lonely and crave companionship. In any case, I often skipped the evenings when she was away, going to the movies, ball games, or bowling with male friends. But mostly, I stayed at home and watched TV. My job doesn't require travel. In fact, I almost never have to leave my condominium if I don't want to. I sell proprietary computer software and hardware online that makes renewable energy systems much more efficient and seamlessly integrates them into the electrical grid. In fact, I have invented and patented products that I sell and can manage software from my powerful computer in my home office, only needing to supervise equipment production in the suburbs of the large city I live in for a few hours a week. Since I'm home often during the day, I know most of the neighbors, which is uncommon in most American apartment buildings, where you only see others at monthly meetings. Other residents tried to persuade me to become president of the condominium association, but I managed to resist. However, I agreed to handle the association's accounting. In our condominium, there are 4 duplex apartments on each of the 2 floors, and a single-level apartment on each floor. The duplex apartments have an office and 3 bedrooms, as well as a kitchen, large living room, and 3 large bathrooms. Single-level residences have a small living room, kitchen, bathroom, powder room, 1 bedroom, and a small closet. A single-level unit, 5B next to our entrance, 5A on the 5th floor, is rented by a woman who looks too young to afford the rent for an apartment in our luxury building. I'd guess she's 23. Jamie and I are only 29. So I think a lot of people in the building think the same about us, especially since we own our apartment rather than rent. The young woman's name is Cecile Wilson. Most residents are not home during the weekdays, so they are unaware that Cecile is at home most of the week and often receives 2 to 4 visitors a day, all men. Cecile's appearance and the flow of male visitors led me to conclude that Cecile was most likely a high-priced call girl. Although I had my suspicions about Cecile's profession, I didn't bring it up with her the dozen or so times I saw her at the pool or the health club the first year she lived in 5B. For 2 reasons. 1, she doesn't bother anyone, so I don't care what her profession is. And 2, it's not something to discuss in casual conversation. What is Cecile's appearance, you ask? Surprisingly, the first year she moved into 5B, I only saw her wearing makeup twice that I recall. At the pool, she usually wore a conservative one-piece suit, and at the gym, she wore overly bulky shorts and t-shirts. In the hallway, or when she walked to and from the lobby, she almost always wore pants and a long-sleeve shirt. In public, she usually wore her long, shiny brown hair in a bun, and often wore bulky black glasses. Although I was sure she had 20/20th vision, the lenses looked like regular glass. She clearly tried to hide her natural beauty when she wasn't with clients, but she couldn't completely disguise her magnificence. Cecile has an almost perfect face, large bosoms that even conservative outfits cannot hide, extremely long legs with hips that any artist would gladly try to reproduce on canvas or in stone, and a backside that matches her sculpted hips. She is almost 5 feet tall and slim, but not too skinny. My relationship with Cecile was pleasant, if not exactly close. During that first year, we knew each other's first and last names, always smiled, and said hello when we passed by. We had several casual conversations during workouts or at the pool, and once we ran into each other at the local Kroger and spent 5 minutes discussing how to best prepare and serve organic vegetables. She was a health enthusiast, not just about exercise, but also about food. That all changed one Thursday around 1 p.m., a day when Jamie was out of town and was due back on Friday around 6 p.m. I was leaving my apartment to make one of my weekly short trips to the equipment manufacturing plant when I heard screaming in apartment 5B. This was very unusual, especially since the apartments are very soundproof. I listened at the door and didn't like what I heard. It sounded like the man was slapping the woman. I knocked on the door. "Superintendent, open up!" It was quiet for a few seconds, although I thought I heard sobs. Then a deep male voice said through the door, "Screw off, we don't need anything." "Open the damn door, or I'll call the cops," I replied, still hearing the sobs. A big guy opened the door and yelled, "It's none of your freaking business, get the screw away from me and my girlfriend." He was going to say something else, but when I saw Cecile on the floor and what looked like blood, I didn't let him finish. On my keychain, I have a cheap self-defense tool. I don't even know what it's called, but it's a very hard piece of plastic, with a straight part with holes for the fingers, 2 rounded ends that extend beyond my hand when I hold the straight part, and a stub with an enlarged head that goes between the 2 fingers. The guy was taller than me, although I am 6'2", and probably 30 pounds heavier, so I took the tool in my right hand and strike him with all my might in the mouth with the enlarged head of the stub. He backed away as I moved towards him and punched him a second and then a third time. The third time he tripped over Cecile's prone body, strike his head on the marble floor of the foyer, and was out cold. I helped Cecile up, led her to an easy chair, and closed the front door. She had a black eye, was bleeding from her nose, and had scratches on her arm and leg. She was wearing a negligee, and despite my best efforts to focus solely on helping her, I couldn't help but notice her phenomenal bosoms and otherwise fantastic body. "Are you okay?" was my first stupid question. "Can I get you something?" "I'm hurting right now," she moaned, and then taking a deep breath, she continued. "I'll be fine, but could you get me some paper towels for my nose and a cold compress from the freezer?" I quickly complied with the request, and while she applied a compress to her eye, I wiped the blood from her nose. "Who is this a-hole?" I asked, nodding my head towards the guy lying on the floor. "An angry customer," she muttered. "We should call the police," I said, finishing with her nose. "No cops," she answered quickly. Over the next few minutes, we repeatedly discussed calling the police, but it was clear that she did not want to, likely because she didn't want their attention due to her profession. Finally, I gave up. "I have an idea. I don't want him to think he can do this again. Do you trust me to take care of him?" "Yes, as long as it's not in my apartment," she muttered, wincing in obvious pain. I quickly went to my apartment, grabbed a couple of zip ties, a bottle of water, a bottle of booze, and for the first time, it was useful to be married to a pharmaceutical sales rep. Besides the money Jamie brought in, I grabbed some sleeping pills from her stash of legal pills. When I returned, I turned the huge guy over and tied his hands behind his back with the zip ties. Then I rolled him onto his back and splashed cold water on his face. He woke up, I picked him up, he was too heavy to carry. I took the keys out of his pants and led him downstairs. I asked him to point out his car, sat him in the driver's seat, and convinced him that the pills were painkillers that would make him feel better. I helped him take the pills with water and then talked to him, trying my best to convince him never to come to our building again until the pills took effect and he was already on his way to La La Land. I poured booze into his mouth. He passed out, and I cut the ties, put them in my pocket, started his car, and locked it. I then called emergency to report a drunk sitting in a stopped car in our parking lot. I didn't wait for the police to arrive, but went back up to Cecile. Cecile's door was still partially open, so I knocked and opened it further. "Cecile, this is Blake. Can I come in and see how you are?" I heard her mutter. "Of course. Come in now." She was sitting on the couch, wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants over her negligee, her head thrown back with one compress on her nose and another on her eye. "Let me take a look," I said when I was next to her. Then I carefully removed her hand and the compress from her eye. It didn't look very good. "I think you should let me take you to the emergency room," I said sternly. She began to protest, but I said in an even more stern voice, "Cecile, I'm not a doctor, but your eye needs to be examined. I'm taking you to the emergency room, and you have no choice. Where are your shoes and purse?" She obediently pointed them out to me. I put her shoes on her feet. Damn, even her legs are great, flashed through my head when I did this, and we walked slowly. When we got down to the building, I led her away from the police. They had smashed the front passenger side window, turned off the car, pulled the guy out, and loaded him into the van just as the tow truck pulled up. On the way to the hospital, I called my production team and said that I would be late. I helped Cecile register at the hospital, confirmed that she had health insurance, and then gave her my business card, which included my cell phone number. "Call me when you're done. I'll pick you up and take you home," I told her, handing her the card. "You've already done too much." "You don't," she began to say when I interrupted her. I carefully placed the card in her hand. "No, listen, call me. You may need to stop by to pick up your medication. Call me and I'll be here in 10 minutes. I have no urgent business today," I said. "Okay, thank you," she said, trying her best to smile weakly. Then I patted her on the head and left. I was just finishing work at production when my cell phone rang. "Hey, Blake, this is Cecile," came a relatively strong voice on the other end, stronger than when I dropped her off. "Are you ready to leave?" I asked. "Well, yes, but I can hail a taxi if you're busy," she continued. "I'm not busy," I answered cheerfully. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. The traffic is a little worse than usual. Just wait in the emergency room and I'll come pick you up, okay?" "Thank you," she replied quickly. When I picked her up, she had a bandage over her eye and cotton in her nose. We stopped at the pharmacy to buy her pain pills and ointment. And then I brought her back to the apartment. "How about I bring you something to eat for dinner?" I said as she sat down on the sofa. "You don't have to." "I want to," I interrupted her again. "I'll eat alone if I don't. How about chicken fingers and fresh vegetables?" I saw her hesitate, and then remembering our discussion at Kroger, I added with a big smile, "Everything is organic." She laughed as much as she could. "What if I come with the food already prepared at 6 o'clock? Does that sound good to you?" She smiled faintly. "Here, so you don't have to knock on the door. Just come in," she said, handing me the key from her purse. I brought food, a bottle of wine, and a large bottle of seltzer, and at 6 o'clock in the evening, I entered Cecile's apartment using the key she gave me. Only then did I take a moment to look around her place, having previously been too concerned about her condition. The apartment was sparsely but stylishly decorated, with several clearly original paintings. They weren't Van Goghs, but they were fun and well painted. Cecile was sitting at the kitchen table, her greeting and smile much stronger than when I left her 3 hours earlier. While we ate, we chatted about nothing in particular. "I can't drink wine with the painkillers I'm taking," she said as I poured her a glass. I stopped pouring. "Sorry, I didn't think about that." "It's not allowed, but I need a couple of glasses." She grinned, nodding for me to pour more, which I did. "You're not going to take advantage of me if I fall into a trap, are you?" she asked with a semblance of a smile. "Then I'd be worse than that a whole. But I don't want to because I'll have to carry your back to your bed. So don't pass out." I chuckled. "I'll try not to do that," she replied. When we finished dinner and I cleared the table, I noticed two things. She did have some kind of reaction to the combination of pain pills and the glass and a half of wine she had drunk. Although she was still mostly sane, she suddenly wanted to have a serious conversation. "You probably think I'm terrible for entertaining men," she said, not looking me in the eye and sipping from her glass of wine. "Of course not. How you earn your living is your business if it doesn't infringe on my rights," I answered sincerely. "How long ago did you realize that I work as an escort?" she asked, this time making eye contact with her one eye that wasn't covered. "About a month after you moved in," I replied dispassionately, sipping my glass of wine. "You and your wife, what's her name? Jamie. Are you and Jamie talking about this?" she asked. "Never. Jamie doesn't come here often, as you've probably guessed, and it's not something we could talk about anyway. I don't gossip, and I certainly wouldn't speculate on the profession of a good neighbor." After some more conversation, where she was feeling me out and unloading, she said, "You're the only straight guy I've known since I've lived here who hasn't hit on me. Why?" "Because I take my marriage vows seriously. More than 90% of my clients are married," she replied. "But I'm not one of them. If you're wondering, physically, you are the most desirable woman I've ever seen. But I don't know you well enough to know if I'm compatible with you, and I've never been into just a physical relationship. I need emotional attachment to have the sexual experience I want. So if you're offended that I didn't hit on you, don't be..." She didn't say anything in response. She just looked at me with her one good eye for a good 30 seconds. You know, despite the number of clients and the physical nature of my business, I am lonely. I have almost no friends. My type of business and hours of work preclude this, at least for the people I would like to interact with. After that, we had a painfully direct conversation about her personal life. It ended with me asking, "So what is your ultimate goal in life, Cecile?" "Ultimately, I want the same thing as you. I want to have a spouse and eventually even children. I want someone to be my one and only, for me to be faithful to him, and for him to be faithful to me. I'm saving enough money so that I'll be financially independent by the time I'm 30, and then I'll move out, give up this life, and try to find the right man. But my plans are temporarily on hold, because until my eye, nose, and these scratches on my limbs heal, I won't be working. An idea suddenly came to me. "Tell me how you feel about working for me," I began to say when she suddenly flushed. "What? I thought you were different," she said in a high-pitched voice with tense muscles and an expression of disbelief on her face. "Let me finish," I laughed. Realizing this wasn't something to laugh at, I quickly said, "I'm not trying to hire you for Zex. I need help filling out paperwork. I'm hopelessly behind and keep putting it off. This is something that even a Cyclops can do if he puts his mind to it. But I can't pay your normal rate," I continued, now that she had relaxed and even giggled at my cyclopean joke. "$700 an hour, $2,500 for a full night, $4,000 a day on site plus expenses," she muttered, before catching herself, blushing, and putting her hand to her mouth. "I can't pay $700 an hour, but I can pay $25 an hour and offer free food now and then until you're healed," she giggled. "On Monday, show me what you want me to do and I'll let you know." After another 20 minutes of small talk, it was clear she was exhausted, so I gathered my things. She hugged me, whispering, "Thank you very much," in my ear. I kept my distance. As to my chagrin, I was getting aroused. I patted her on the head and left. Despite the excitement at the end, I found it a lovely evening with a friend. No real sexual connotations. I liked her as a person and never thought that she might be lonely. On Friday morning, while I was working in my apartment, there was a knock on my door. "Hi, Blake," said a smiling Cecile, dressed in her usual conservative clothes. "Hello, Cecile. Are you feeling better today?" I asked cheerfully. "It still hurts like hell, but I'm in a better mood." She chuckled. "You probably want your key back," I began to say, reaching for the key on the table in the foyer. "No, why don't you keep it in case I need to be rescued again and the guy doesn't answer the door? I'm here because I hate to ask for more help after everything you've done, but I desperately need groceries, and the doctor has forbidden me to drive with my blindfold and pain pills. Can you take me sometime today?" "Of course," I smiled broadly. "How about in an hour, 1:30? "Great," she giggled, clapping her hands. "Just knock on my door when you're ready." Cecile and I had a great time grocery shopping. I think this was the first time in my life that grocery shopping was actually fun. While I don't hate the activity, I've never particularly enjoyed it. I had fun with Cecile, especially when she humorously talked to the vegetables, imagining they were people. The following Monday, Cecile came to my apartment shortly after Jamie had left for work. I showed her how to fill out all the different papers that were lying around my office and even in the living room. She was very conscientious, not fast, but it was the first time she was filling out paperwork, so accuracy was more important than speed. We had lunch together, worked some more, and then I took her to the pharmacy to buy some things she needed. Thus began my friendship with Cecile Wilson. I think I was the only male friend Cecile had since she was 18. Every other man she met wanted to sleep with her, and that was his sole purpose for communicating with Cecile. It's not that I didn't find her attractive. She was the most alluring and sultry woman I've ever met. But I was married, I took my vows seriously, and I had other attractive women as friends in the past, so I didn't see Cecile as just a Zex object. With Cecile around, the nights and weekends when Jamie was out of town were no longer lonely. With Cecile, I always had something to do, even after she was completely healed about a month later, and looked as good as before she met that guy. And since her regular work schedule consisted of morning and afternoon hours on weekdays with the occasional overnight or out-of-town stay, we did almost everything together. On those evenings when Jamie wasn't around, I encouraged Cecile to attend parties and meetings sponsored by the condominium association and made sure she had a good time. However, I realized that I couldn't take her on outings with my male friends. They were too busy either trying to hit on her or drooling to be good company. So she and I mostly went alone. She seemed to enjoy it. Even when she started working as a call girl again, she insisted on helping me with the paperwork. I soon discovered she had greater intellectual curiosity and intelligence than she had been given credit for most of her life. So I encouraged her and started teaching her about my business. When I tried to pay her for help, she always put forward some conditions. For example, a swim in the pool or how much time we could study in the office for double payment or nothing. More often than not, I ended up paying nothing, which seemed to make her happier than when I paid her double. I found Cecile to be one of the most honest and kind people I've ever met. She spent about 10 hours trying to find the owner of a small handbag with no ID, but nearly $100 in cash that had been lost at the pool. She eventually succeeded. She told me about a client who developed health problems during Zex, and she took him to the hospital and gave him his money back despite his protests that she should keep it. She cried when she couldn't save a little bird that crashed into the window in the lobby of our building. She found a lost puppy and returned it to its owner, refusing a reward. She tipped the paperboy extra, never gossiped or said anything bad about anyone, and never acted rudely or meanly even when boys hit on her. About 8 or 9 months after Cecile and I became best friends, she surprised me by showing me an application for admission to the local community college. "I want to get an associate's degree in business administration," she announced with a wide grin on her face. "Can you sometimes help me with homework?" "Of course I can," I said. "I'm so proud of you." She was absolutely delighted by this comment and ran up to me and hugged me tightly. Every time she did this, I had to make sure my lap was at a distance from hers. But I'm afraid this time she hugged me so long and tightly that she must have known about my arousal. But neither of us paid any attention to it. I was pleasantly surprised that as Jamie learned more about my friendship with Cecile, she didn't become jealous. I think this was due to several factors. First, Cecile and I never showed our affection in public. In private, we never did more than hug or kiss chastely on the cheek. The second reason was that we developed a great cover story for Cecile's profession. Third, Cecile began helping Jamie with paperwork, for which Jamie was very grateful. Fourth, I convinced a longtime gay friend of mine who wasn't open, but I'd known he was gay since high school, to serve as Cecile's boyfriend at condo association parties and even go on occasional double dates with Jamie and me. Of course, there must be a problem. Life is never smooth, as it has been for me the last 2 years. On Sunday morning, after a phone call, Jamie had to rush out of town on business and was much more distracted than usual when she left. As she hurried out, she pulled out a jumbled pile of documents from her briefcase, placed them on the coffee table, and asked if Cecile could sort them into folders. I answered, "Certainly." I was very disappointed with Jamie's quick departure because that day we were supposed to go apple picking, which happens once a year, and I really enjoyed it. Shortly after Jamie left, I sent Cecile a text. "Jamie left on the bus. Want to pick apples this afternoon?" She quickly replied, "Let's go at 11 or any time after 2, okay?" A happy expression appeared on the screen. We had a great time picking apples and eating apple cider donuts, even though several college guys tried to look down Cecile's shorts as she stood on the stairs and stared at her in the donut shop. That evening, we had dinner together at my condominium and planned to watch a DVD afterward. But before I put the disc in the player, Cecile asked, "What is this?" Reaching for the pile of papers Jamie had left in disarray on the coffee table. "Oh, these are the papers that Jamie dropped off in a hurry and asked if you could process them before she returns on Wednesday evening," I replied dispassionately. "Of course," she replied, trying to gather the papers together so she could pick them up. While she was doing this, something fell from the stack onto the floor. I was busy loading a DVD and only noticed something had fallen when I turned and looked at Cecile's face. She was holding what looked like a photograph in her hands and had a completely traumatized expression. "What is this, Cecile?" Nothing," she said quickly, placing the photo back in the center of the stack. Cecile would never be a professional poker player. Her face clearly showed that this was not nothing. I approached her. "Let me see what you were looking at." "No, it's nothing," she answered, trying to slowly leave the room with a bunch of various papers in her hands. This made me even more curious. I carefully took her hand. "No, I really want to see this. What's the big secret?" When I freed her from the load, she sank onto the sofa and buried her face in her hands. About halfway down the stack, there were 3 6x9 photos, each of which featured Jamie unclothed and with a different guy, making out with her, having sex, and she did it on camera. I sank onto the living room carpet. 2 photographs and the rest of the pile of papers fell to the floor, and I sat stunned with the 3rd photograph in my hand. "I'm really, really sorry," Cecile said, putting her hand on my face. I looked at her, stunned. "Maybe these are old photos from before you got married," she said, trying to find something positive. "She only got a butterfly tattoo on her left shoulder 2 years ago," I muttered in response after a long pause, during which Cecile asked if there was anything she could do. I finally said, "Cecile, I need some time alone to process this. Even though you are my best friend, I don't want to talk to anyone right now. Please." I'm sure there were tears in my eyes. I know Cecile did too when she hugged me just before she left. After half an hour of crying, I slapped myself and said in the mirror, "Action, not pity, you weakling." I ran around the house like a whirling dervish, looking in all of Jamie's dresser drawers, the boxes she kept on closet shelves in several different rooms, and her office files. One of her desk drawers was locked, so I opened it. I found at least a dozen incriminating pieces of evidence. The question wasn't whether Jamie cheated on me, but for how long and with how many different guys. I went through many stages of anger, humiliation, irritation, and shock. The only constant theme was how could I be so damn naive? I didn't sleep that night. On Monday, I looked and felt like hell. I didn't get much work done, and I had even less luck deciding what I was going to do with Jamie. Around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I heard a knock on the door. It was Cecile with a pitcher of margaritas, which was quite surprising because I'd never had more than one at a time in my life, and I'd never seen her drink more than one either. Cecile burst into my apartment. "Listen, stud," she said, putting the jug on the coffee table. "I canceled my meeting for today. I called your production assistants and told them you wouldn't be working this afternoon. We're going to get drunk as hell, and tomorrow you will decide what to do with your little wife." I started to protest, but it was no use. Throwing all of Jamie's papers that had fallen on the floor the night before except for 3 photographs towards our fake fireplace, I took the glass Cecile was holding out to me and took a sip from it. God, it burned. Cecile was focused on making me not only drunk, but also happy. After an hour of hilarious stories and 6 drinks, maybe more, I lost count, she finally succeeded. I passed out before it got dark outside for the first time since I graduated from college 7 years ago. I was lying on the floor next to the sofa, and Cecile was lying on the sofa with one of her arms hanging down and touching me. After a while, I began to hear ringing in my ears. After the 3rd time it stopped and started again, I realized it was the landline phone. I stumbled towards it and saw on the caller ID that it was Jamie's cell phone. I unplugged the telephone, returned to the sofa, moved Cecile over, and fell asleep, cuddled up to her. Cecile and I woke up together in the middle of the night, probably around 4 in the morning. Her first comment, made with a mischievous smile, was mind-blowing. "You're the first guy I slept with who didn't screw me, Eliminator." I started laughing. "When you look at yourself in the mirror, you'll understand why." "Broomhilda," I muttered. "You're not a prize yourself." "To be honest, I can't tell if I'm talking to your face or your back, a-hole," she replied, laughing hysterically. We both got up, went to the bathroom, drank some water, and then fell asleep next to each other, fully clothed on the covers in the master bedroom. I woke up around 8 o'clock to the smell of bacon and eggs. I stumbled downstairs to the kitchen. "Breakfast for 2, Cecile said in a sing-song voice. "I thought I'd have to light a stick of dynamite to wake you up." She laughed. I felt like crap and cringed when I saw myself in the mirror. "This is definitely the worst thing I've ever seen in my life," I said out loud. Then I looked at Cecile. She had clearly showered, changed clothes, and put on light makeup. She looked amazing. No one should look that good ever, especially after being hungover the day before. "I hang out with you because of your charm, not your looks," she grumbled while turning an egg. "Now sit down and try to hide your face behind the cereal box so I can have breakfast in peace." I didn't realize how hungry I was until I started eating. The food was delicious, and I inhaled it almost as much as I ate it. "I'm glad to see that a man appreciates my cooking," Cecile laughed as I finished the 3rd egg, 200 grams of bacon, and the 4th piece of toast. "Are you going to finish this bagel?" I asked, pointing my empty fork at the buttered bagel quarter sitting on Cecile's plate. She laughed and tossed it onto my plate. It disappeared down my throat in seconds. After Cecile put away the dishes and loaded the dishwasher, she took my head in her hands and looked me straight in the eyes. "I'm busy today and have an overnight stay, but I'll be here tomorrow afternoon. Let me know if there's anything I can do. But you have some real decisions to make. And before you do anything hasty, you need to talk to Jamie in person." "Do you hear?" "Okay," I muttered, nodding my head several times to emphasize the point. Cecile kissed me chastely on the lips. For the first time, she kissed my lips. You're disgusting," she giggled. "Shave, shower, and brush your teeth before you do anything else." I laughed, nodded, and she left. By the end of the day on Tuesday, I had sobered up, cleaned the apartment, photographed all the evidence, or saved it digitally onto a flash drive. I didn't talk to anyone except my software assistant and my production foreman. My cell phone was full of messages, mostly from Jamie, but also from her parents, and even mine. I didn't want to talk to her, and it was just fine that my inbox was full and my landline was disconnected. I had pretty much decided what to do, but was still working out the details when Jamie burst into the apartment frantically on Wednesday morning, 12 hours before she was due to arrive. I saw it was her and turned away. "Blake, I was so worried," she said with genuine concern in her voice. "You weren't answering your calls, and I was sure something had happened. What the hell could be wrong? My dear faithful wife?" I chuckled with as much sarcasm as I could muster. She turned white and raised her hand to her mouth. Her eyes fell on the papers she had left on the coffee table, now in a neat stack. She began to tremble. "Let me show you my little pile of treats," I said with the same sarcasm, taking her hand and leading her to the evidence laid out on the kitchen table. "Maybe you can explain this crap," I barked. After several deep, choking sobs, she began to babble. "Blake, I love you. It didn't mean anything. I got so competitive and wanted to be #1 in sales. I just made a few business deals. I'll stop, I promise. We have to get through this. You are the only one for me. I will get pregnant and we can start a family," etc., etc., etc. Finally, I snapped. I walked into the master bedroom, grabbed all of her clothes from the closet and dresser drawers, not caring what state I left them in, and threw them all into the guest room. Some things fell on the bed, most on the floor. Jamie stood in the hallway sobbing and then fell to her knees. When I was done, I went into the kitchen, found the lock I had bought the day before at the hardware store, and installed it on the master bedroom door while she continued to sob and repeat, "No, no, no." Once the bedroom and my office, which already had a decent lock, were secured, I left. First, I went to my production site, then to lunch, and then to the cinema. I returned to the apartment around 11 in the evening. Jamie was sitting on the sofa in the living room. She looked terrible. Her mother and sister were there. "Why are you here, Candace?" I asked irritably, looking at my mother-in-law. To me, she was a typical condescending rich witch. I always tried to be friendly to maintain some semblance of peace between us. "No more, Blake," she said, clearly taken aback by my attitude. "Jamie's sister Sherry and I want to offer any help we can to help you get over Jamie's mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed. "Is that what you call it? Did you show your mom the photos, honey?" I asked Jamie sarcastically. She lowered her eyes, avoiding eye contact. "You know what you can do, Candace? Make Jamie screw those 34 other guys she had sex with, and then we can talk." I went into my bedroom and locked the door. Surprisingly, I slept well that night. When I got up the next morning, Jamie was gone. There was a simple note. "I've decided to go see Mom and Dad until you calm down and we can talk some more. Don't throw away our future, Blake. We can get through this. Love, Jamie." On Monday morning at her parents' house, Jamie was handed divorce papers. There were 2 sets. The first proposed divorce by mutual consent, dividing property 50/50ths due to irreconcilable differences. The second asked for a divorce on the grounds of infidelity, accompanied by 5 pieces of evidence that left no doubt. My simple note read, "I haven't filed any of these yet. Take your pick. I need to hear from you by 9 a.m. tomorrow. If I don't hear from you by then, I'll submit application number 2. Have a nice life." On Monday evening, around 6 o'clock, there was a knock on my apartment door. It was Cecile. "Let's go eat pizza. My treat," she said with a wide smile. "I don't," I began to say, but she immediately cut me off. "You don't have a single excuse not to go. Let's go." "Okay," I said. "I need my wallet," as I started to walk back to the apartment. "No, you don't. I'm treating you. You only need the keys." She smiled, took my hand, and pulled me out of the apartment, picking up the keys from the table near the door and handing them to me. We ate at our favorite pizzeria with all organic ingredients, of course. Cecile tried to be as cheerful as possible, which helped a little, although I was still sullen compared to my usual demeanor when I was full. Since we were in a secluded part of the restaurant, she took my hand and asked, "Have you decided what you will do?" "Yes, I sent her 2 sets of divorce papers today, one conciliatory, the other hostile, and told her it was her choice. I'll serve one of them tomorrow morning." "No chance of reconciliation?" I thought long and hard about this. I just can't forgive or forget. Loyalty is very important to me, and it's obvious she doesn't care about that. I don't even intend to talk to her anymore. Cecile continued to look between my hand and my eyes. Finally, she spoke. "When your divorce is final, I want to get you first." "What?" I asked, sure that I had not heard her correctly. "You're my best friend. Plus, I'm in love with you. As soon as we go on our first date, I'll quit my current job. I'm confident I can find another job, and I don't care if it doesn't pay a penny. I have enough savings to last until I get you, and I will if you give me a chance." I was stunned. I had no idea that Cecile was actually in love with me. She interpreted my silence as restraint rather than shock. I wondered how she didn't realize that not only would I give her a chance, but I would fall madly in love with the goddess who was already my best friend. Just the thought of sex with this incredible woman suddenly made not only my manhood tremble, but my whole body. "I know you probably won't want to have an ex-call girl as your girlfriend, but I promise you won't regret it if—" "Shut up!" I barked. Then I stood up and kissed Cecile hard on the lips. After a couple of seconds, she understood. She rose from her seat, and we kissed passionately across the table. When we finally parted, I sat back down. "If you're crazy enough to be in love with me, let me tell you my plan. We keep our relationship as is until 2 weeks before my divorce is final. At that point, you quit your job, I sell my condo, and you break your lease. The day the divorce is final, we go to a resort for a week, and if after that you still want a relationship, we move to another part of the country, rent an apartment together, and if you're still crazy enough to want me, we get married." Cecile put her hands to her mouth and began to cry. We held hands as we walked back to our apartments. I had never felt so alive, and Cecile was practically glowing with delight. We kissed passionately, and I didn't care that my hardness was pressing against her before she went into 5B and I into 5A. We looked at each other with big smiles until the doors closed. That night, I knew I wanted our plan to work more than anything else I had ever wanted in my life. However, I expected complications, and the first one came when Jamie's father, James, called at 7:50 a.m. Hearing his voice made me tense. Hello, Blake. This is James Snowden. I was hoping I could get Jamie an hour off your 9 o'clock deadline so we could meet. The meeting won't change anything, James. Blake, you have nothing to lose. If after an hour-long meeting with me, you still want a divorce, I guarantee that Jamie will choose the irreconcilable differences option, and things will move forward quickly. Please, you owe me this. I didn't owe him a damn thing, but considering how I wanted my relationship with Cecile to develop, speed was crucial. Okay, when will we meet? I can be there in half an hour. See you then, I said, hanging up. The meeting with James was useless, except to confirm that he had no idea what I was really like. He tried to convince me of how economically beneficial it would be to stay married to Jamie and how rich I would end up being. He did everything he could to keep me married. He even offered me $2 million in cash and promised that Jamie would sign a postnuptial agreement, guaranteeing me another $2 million if she ever cheated again. Sorry, James. You did everything you could for your little girl, but there will be no deal. I'm still trying to understand why she wants to stay married. I would assume she'd be happy if I didn't get in her way. Cheating wasn't her style, Blake. She just lost focus on what was important. Sorry, I won't do that. Don't forget to ask her to deliver the signed papers to my lawyer this morning. James looked sad when he left. Perhaps not because he was getting rid of me, but because his little girl had to go to a psychiatrist. Finally, the day came. The divorce was final. Both Cecile and I moved out of our apartments after 10 days. I sold my apartment and all the furniture in it, except the computer equipment Jamie didn't need, and Cecile's 30-day lease was up, so she sold her furniture too. I almost completely completed the sale of my business's hardware to my employees. Jamie did not appear in court, only her lawyer for the final hearing. I showed up only because I wanted to get my hands on a copy of the resolution immediately. After the trial, I knocked on the door to apartment 5B, my luggage packed for the trip to the resort. I expected Cecile to be ready to go. She was indeed ready, but not for the trip. She was unclothed, except for her high heels and ankle bracelet. We have time to get to know each other better before we go to the resort. Besides, I don't think you can handle a 2-hour drive, she giggled, pointing at my hardness. Cecile dragged me by my tie into her apartment. Since her bed had already been taken by her customer, the couch cushions lay on the living room floor. While we were kissing passionately, she unbuttoned all my clothes, took off my shirt, pulled down my boxers, and worked on my hardness. Meanwhile, I enjoyed massaging her large, perfectly shaped bosoms. Then I took off my shoes, got out of my pants and boxers, and without taking off my socks, began to work on her honeypot. It tasted and felt even better than it looked. She climaxed after a while, and I was still caressing her body. She muttered, "Now make love to me." As I took her, she kissed me, wrapping her magnificent thighs around me. And then something unique happened. She began to contract her pelvic muscles powerfully. As a result, I quickly reached the climax. A few seconds later, her muscles tightened even more, and we both screamed and shook. I don't know if I lost consciousness, but I was definitely delirious. Cecile held me tightly. Finally, I came to my senses completely, rolled onto my side, and felt a delicious impulse in my spine as my hardness left what was now its favorite place in the world. I looked up into her face. She smiled widely. "Those were the first 2 real climaxes I've had since I can remember," she chirped, still grinning. "Do you know why?" "Because I'm such a wonderful sex god," I laughed in response. "You would," she giggled, and then became serious. "I reached fantastic climaxes because we made love. We didn't just screw. I really love you, Blake. And I love you very much too, Cecile. Even before you just rocked my world with Zex that was so much better than anything I'd ever experienced before. It felt like something else entirely." She kissed me deeply. Having rested a little, we played the second round. After mutual caresses, we had Zex. Actually, we made love again, because that's what it really was. Finally, we got dressed. I loaded our suitcases into the car, and we drove off. On the way to the resort, Cecile snuggled up to me until we had driven for about an hour. Then she pulled away. "Blake, I have 4 things to tell you. I have to do this now before we continue. Ready?" "Ready," I smiled. "First of all, my name is not Cecile Wilson. I'm Barbara Godden, Babs for short. I have a full set of fake IDs, good enough to sign a lease and buy a car. If things work out between us, I intend to completely rid myself of my old identity and cut off all contact with my 4 years as an escort." "Wow, you could work for the CIA," I whistled. "You are very good at hiding your identity. Should I call you Babs now?" "Don't call me Babs until you're ready to put a ring on it, as Beyoncé sings," she chuckled. "Okay, Cecile, what's the next revelation?" "I stopped working as an escort the day I told you I loved you, and I accelerated through a community college program. I finished my freshman year and have 3 credits for my sophomore year." "This is fantastic," I answered sincerely, "and not just for one reason. You are full of surprises. Not finished yet?" she grinned. "Thirdly, I came up with a new concept for an online business that I would like to open. I'll suggest this idea to you after our visit to the resort. And if you like it, we can work 50-50ths. I can't wait to hear about it, I smiled. Finally? Fourthly, and this is the only thing that makes me tense, she sighed and seemed to blush. If you have questions about my work as an escort, you should ask them this week, and I will answer them honestly. After this week, I don't even want to think about it anymore, and any mention of it will make me very angry. So if you have questions, ask them this week. It was obvious that the topic made her nervous. Since I had long ago decided that I didn't care about her past profession, although I'd be lying if I didn't admit that I was very glad she stopped working as an escort over 2 months ago, I had nothing else to think about. I wanted to ask her, but I couldn't leave her hanging. So I came up with what I thought was a clever answer. After an appropriately long pause, I said, I really only have one question, and I'll leave it at that. She looked at me expectantly. You said you charged $700 an hour, right? Yes, she answered hesitantly. Now that I've made love to you, I wonder why you charge so little. You should have charged 100 times more. She smiled widely, kissed my cheek, and then rested her head on my shoulder. That was the last time we talked about this. Our stay at the resort was phenomenal. I'm sure no one had a better honeymoon, although technically we didn't have a honeymoon. For me, it was all kinds of fun like snorkeling, swimming, jet skiing, hiking, playing beach volleyball, archery, drinking with my best friend, and then dancing, hugging, and kissing a goddess. That's not even counting the Zex, which was truly otherworldly. The only problem I had after 7 days was that my man's tool and tongue were so sore it hurt. But it was a contented and satisfied pain because I was the happiest I had ever been. After the first day at the resort, when we fell asleep in each other's arms after fantastic lovemaking, I decided that I would propose to her, which I did on the 5th day. She said yes. I would have gotten married the day after we left the resort, but since Cecile Babs had never married and had a few relatives she cared about and wanted to be around, we waited 3 months and had a small but perfectly proper wedding ceremony and reception in our new city. Within 9 months of moving to a new city, Babs earned an associate's degree in business administration. We worked together in my software business, and 3 months later, we launched her new business using a patented system she came up with to maximize promotions on the internet using hybrid recognition of search queries. Now, 3 years after launching, we have decided to sell her business for a 7-figure sum because she needs to focus on something else. Babs, my best friend, Zex goddess, and love of my life, is pregnant with twins.
Welcome to my channel. Support our channel by subscribing. Your subscription helps us grow and create more intriguing content like this. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was the Christmas season, and for James and Rachel, it should have been a time of celebration, a chance to unwind and bask in warmth of family and friendship. The couple had always looked forward to this time of year, decorating their home, hosting holiday parties, and sharing intimate moments together. But this Christmas, something was different. Beneath the glittering lights and festive cheer, there was a dark undercurrent, a quiet tension that neither of them could escape. For James, the holidays were always a time of joy, filled with memories of family traditions and the deep connection he felt with Rachel. Over the years, they had built a life together, with shared hopes and dreams. But now, as the Christmas lights flickered on the front porch, James couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Rachel, on the other hand, seemed distant. She was no longer the woman who would eagerly help him decorate the tree or plan the perfect Christmas dinner. Her smiles felt forced, and her gaze seemed distracted, often lingering on her phone or looking past him. Every time James tried to initiate a conversation, there was a subtle, unspoken disconnect. She would smile, but it never reached her eyes. It wasn't just the holiday stress. Something had changed between them, something that neither of them had acknowledged yet. In the weeks leading up to the party, James kept telling himself it was just the holiday chaos, that Rachel was simply overwhelmed by work and the busyness of life. But as the days passed, that internal voice of doubt grew louder, and he began to question what was really happening behind the closed doors of their marriage. The scene was set for a Christmas neither of them would ever forget. What started as a holiday of family traditions and love would soon turn into the unraveling of everything James thought he knew about his wife and their relationship. The secrets, the betrayals, the lies, they were all about to come to light under the most festive of circumstances, setting the stage for a Christmas that would mark the end of their old life together. James had always been the one to make Christmas special. He would hang the lights on the roof, arrange the garland around the fireplace, and spend hours cooking a holiday feast. He loved the idea of creating perfect moments, bringing a little bit of magic into the mundane. But this year, there was a new sense of urgency. The house was decorated with every detail meticulously planned, yet something felt out of place. Rachel's once engaged participation was now reduced to silence. While James was focused on creating the ideal holiday atmosphere, Rachel seemed lost in her thoughts. The excitement she usually radiated had been replaced by an almost palpable distance. She didn't seem to care about Christmas plans, the tree, or even their dinner guests. It wasn't just that she was preoccupied, it was as if she were in a different world altogether. Their interactions were strained. James would excitedly show her a new decoration or ask for her opinion on the food, only to be met with distracted answers or quick dismissals. Her smile, once so genuine, now seemed forced. Even their usual light-hearted banter had faded into something distant and cold. There were small signs that James couldn't ignore. Rachel seemed to spend longer periods of time away from him, retreating to the study or going out for walks alone. When they did spend time together, it was often awkward, as if they were two strangers trying to hold on to the remnants of connection that had already begun to fade. James began to notice how she would smile at her phone, her fingers scrolling furiously as she laughed softly at something someone had sent her. His heart sank with every shared moment between Rachel and her colleague Ethan, who had often been the one to send these texts. James could place it, but something about Ethan made him uneasy. He had always been professional at work, but now he appeared to be more than just a colleague. Rachel's tone was warmer, her attention more focused on him, and when they spoke, there was a familiarity between them that felt too intimate to be purely platonic. James tried to push away his growing doubts, focusing instead on the final preparations for the Christmas party. But every time he saw Ethan and Rachel together, every subtle interaction that James couldn't ignore, he felt something tighten in his chest. Something was wrong. He couldn't prove it, but he could feel it. This year's Christmas was no longer just about joy and family. The season had taken on an ominous tone, and the tension was growing, waiting to be revealed. The night of the Christmas party arrived, and James tried to push his worries to the back of his mind. Guests filled the house, laughter echoed off the walls, and the food was served, but the heaviness that hung over him remained. Rachel was still distant, lost in her world, while Ethan appeared more than comfortable among their friends. He stood too close to Rachel, laughed too easily with her, and, to James' increasing discomfort, stole more than a few glances at her. The moment that would change everything came with the hanging of the mistletoe, a harmless Christmas tradition meant to spread some light-hearted joy. The party was in full swing, people were sipping wine and chatting, when someone, perhaps it was Ethan, told Rachel to stand under the mistletoe. It was all in good fun, everyone expecting a quick kiss on the cheek or an exaggerated kiss on the lip for the amusement of the guests. But what happened next shattered James's world. Under the mistletoe, Rachel and Ethan didn't just share a playful peck. They kissed, deeply, passionately. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a confession of something hidden, something that James had long feared but hadn't dared to acknowledge. It wasn't the act that struck him the hardest. It was the intimacy of it. The connection they shared was undeniable. And worse, it was so open and public, as if they had no care for the world around them. James froze, his heart pounding his chest as he watched the two of them pull away from each other, both of them smiling in a way that made James sick to his stomach. His mind couldn't process what just happened. How had it come to this? How had Rachel's betrayal happened so openly, so effortlessly? The laughter in the room felt like an assault on his senses. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His world had been turned upside down in that moment, and the reality of Rachel's infidelity became a harsh, painful truth. He didn't know how long he stood there, rooted to the spot, watching as Ethan and Rachel exchanged glances as though they had just shared the most ordinary of moments. When the party finally began to wind down, James couldn't hold in any longer. His emotions were a storm of rage, confusion, and heartbreak. He had to confront Rachel. He needed to know the truth, to understand why she had done this to him, to their family. He found her in the quiet of the hallway, away from the noise of the remaining guests. There was no more pretending, no more smiles or festive cheer. "What was that, Rachel? What was that kiss?" His voice cracked as the pain hit him with full force. "Under the mistletoe, you kiss him like you've been doing it for months." Rachel's face went pale, and for a long moment, she said nothing. The guilt was written all over her face, and James knew he had been right all along. She had been hiding something from him, something far deeper than he had feared. Finally, after a long silence, Rachel broke down. She explained tearfully that the kiss with Ethan was not a mistake. It wasn't just a fleeting moment of passion. It was the culmination of months of emotional neglect. She admitted that she and Ethan had grown close over time, their emotional connection growing stronger with every conversation, every shared moment of vulnerability. Ethan had made her feel seen, heard, things that James had stopped doing years ago. The lack of emotional intimacy in their marriage had created a void that Rachel had filled with Ethan. As Rachel confessed, James's heart shattered. He had always believed in their love, in their marriage. How could it have come to this? Why hadn't she come to him with her feelings instead of seeking solace in another man's arms? He was hurt, but more than that, he was confused. He had failed to see the cracks in their marriage until it was too late. But the confession didn't stop there. Rachel admitted that the affair had been ongoing for months, with the emotional intimacy gradually turning physical. Each revelation felt like a knife in James's chest. The Christmas they had shared, the life they had built, it was all a lie. The confrontation had left James reeling. His emotions were raw, and every thought felt like it was stabbing him from the inside. The festive lights, the laughter from the party, everything that once been a symbol of happiness now seemed like a cruel reminder of his pain. Rachel, too, was devastated by what had happened. She couldn't undo the past, couldn't fix the damage that had been done. She tried to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But James was beyond words. How could he forgive her? The trust between them had been shattered beyond repair. The Christmas that should have been a celebration had now become a day he would never forget for all the wrong reasons. In the days that followed, James struggled with a decision he had never anticipated. Could he ever move past the betrayal, or had their relationship been irreparably broken? Rachel, in her guilt, offered to do whatever it took to rebuild their marriage, but James didn't know if he could ever look at her the same way again. Christmas, once a symbol of warmth and love, had been tainted forever. The memories of this holiday would linger in his mind, not as a time of joy, but as a painful chapter in their lives. The love they had shared was no longer enough to hold them together. Now, they both faced an uncertain future, one that would require healing, introspection, and a difficult decision about whether they could ever rebuild what had been lost. This Christmas had marked the end of an era for James and Rachel. Their marriage, once filled with love and trust, was now on the edge of collapse. The journey ahead was unclear. Would they be able to rebuild their relationship, or would they find themselves lost in the wreckage of their past? The story of their love, now overshadowed by betrayal, had taken a painful turn. For James, this was no longer about the Christmas he had envisioned. It was about finding the strength to face the truth, the courage to forgive or to walk away, and the wisdom to know that some things, no matter how hard you try, can never be the same. In the end, Christmas was no longer about the gifts or the decorations. It was about finding peace in the aftermath of heartbreak, about deciding whether love could truly survive the ultimate betrayal.
The walls, her childhood trophies lined the shelves, and even some old clothes remained in the closet. My heart twisted as I searched through her belongings, feeling like a thief in my own home. Eventually, I found a hairbrush tucked away in a drawer. The golden strand tangled in its bristles made my chest tighten. I sealed the brush in a plastic bag and immediately ordered a DNA test kit online, opting for express delivery. By the time Nina came home that evening, I'd hidden the bag in my office drawer. She walked in quietly, saying little. No apologies. No explanations. She greeted me with a curt, emotionless hey, as though nothing had happened. Hey, I replied, watching her closely. She poured herself a glass of wine and settled onto the couch, scrolling through her phone like it was any other evening. I waited, hoping she'd say something, offer an explanation, defense, anything. But she stayed silent, playing it cool, pretending everything was fine. About last night, I began, keeping my voice steady but low. She didn't even glance up from her phone. I want to talk about it. Well, I do. She let out a dramatic sigh, finally setting her phone down. What do you want me to say, Evan? That you're crazy? That you're blowing this out of proportion? Grant's toast meant nothing. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Her dismissive tone struck a nerve, igniting something raw inside me. Nothing? I repeated bitterly. You're calling his comment about bonds of blood nothing? Do you really think I'm that stupid, Nina? Her eyes met mine at last, cold and defiant. I think you're letting your jealousy of Grant cloud your judgment. I let out a bitter laugh. Jealousy? That's your excuse? You've been hiding something for years, haven't you? Nina shot to her feet, slamming her glass onto the coffee table. I'm not doing this, Evan. Not tonight. You never want to do this, Nina. I fired back, my voice rising. Because you're terrified of what I'll find if I dig too deep. But I'm done letting you dodge the truth. One way or another, I'm going to find out. For a fleeting moment, her expression cracked. Fear, guilt, something she tried to mask with anger. You're being ridiculous, she snapped before storming out of the room. Her reaction only strengthened my resolve. 2 days later, the DNA kit arrived. My hands trembled as I opened the package, carefully following the instructions. I extracted the strands of hair from the brush, sealed them in the provided bag, and mailed it off the same day, paying extra for expedited results. The waiting was unbearable. Every moment spent under the same roof with Nina felt like a silent battlefield. On the surface, she acted like everything was normal, cooking dinner, watching TV, but the unspoken tension between us was suffocating. I saw it in the way she avoided meeting my eyes, the way her smile no longer reached her face. Then, one evening, the email arrived. The results were ready. I locked myself in my office, my heart pounding in my chest. I clicked the link. The document loaded agonizingly slowly, each second stretching into an eternity. And then, the page appeared. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the words, my vision blurring. My stomach dropped, and my chest tightened as though the air had been sucked out of the room. There it was, cold and clinical, the confirmation of my worst fear. Chloe wasn't mine. My hands curled into fists, and for a moment, I thought I might smash something, anything, to release the fury surging through me. The rage, the betrayal, the utter devastation. It all hit me at once, like a tidal wave threatening to drown me. But slowly, the storm inside me began to subside. Not because the anger had faded, it hadn't, but because something colder and sharper took its place. Resolve. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Nina and Grant had lied to me, stolen years of my life, and made me their unwitting pawn. But they had underestimated one thing. I wasn't the kind of man to let betrayal slide. This was only the beginning. The truth burned in my chest like acid. Every time I glanced at Chloe's photos on the wall, her smiling face frozen in time, my heart shattered a little more. I loved her, and nothing could ever change that. But the betrayal behind her existence was unbearable. Nina had taken something sacred from me. Every memory, every moment I cherished as a father, had been tainted by her lies. Yet, it wasn't just the rage or the grief that consumed me. It was the questions. How long had Nina and Grant been deceiving me? Had she ever truly loved me? Or was I just a convenient fool to raise another man's child? How many people in our lives had known the truth while I lived in blissful ignorance? The days after the results were a blur of cold, simmering silence, calculated planning. I avoided Nina as much as I could, my mind consumed by a single goal, justice. She had stolen 5 years of my life, my trust, and my dignity, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. But first, I needed proof. Proof of who Chloe's real father was. The next weekend, I made my move. Without warning, I drove to Grant's house. It was a modest place about 30 minutes away. I didn't call ahead, didn't give him time to prepare. When he opened the door, the smug smile that greeted me made my blood boil. Clearly, he thought this was just another friendly visit. "Evan, didn't expect to see you today," Grant said, leaning casually against the doorframe. "We need to talk," I replied, keeping my voice steady. He hesitated, his confidence flickering for just a moment before stepping aside. "Sure, come on in." The house was painfully neat, almost like he'd staged it to project control and order. It only made my stomach churn. We sat in the living room, and I wasted no time. "Chloe isn't my daughter," I said flatly, locking my eyes on his. For a split second, his face betrayed him. A flicker of guilt, fear, or both. But he quickly covered it with an expression of feigned confusion. "What are you talking about, Evan?" "I did a DNA test," I said, leaning forward, my voice cold and steady. "She's not mine. So I'll ask you once, are you her father?" Grant let out a nervous laugh, shaking his head. "Evan, you've been under a lot of stress lately. I think you're letting your imagination run wild." "Don't lie to me, Grant," I growled, my voice rising as I stood. "You stood at her wedding and practically bragged about it. Bonds of blood? Give me a break. How long have you and Nina been screwing me over?" That struck a nerve. His smug smile faltered, and for a brief moment, I thought he might actually confess. But then he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms with an infuriating shrug. "You don't have any proof of that," he said, his tone dripping with smugness. I clenched my fists, barely holding back the urge to wipe that grin off his face. "Maybe not yet," I said, my voice low and venomous as I stood. "But I will. And when I do, you and Nina are going to wish you'd never crossed me." Grant's expression darkened. He said nothing. I left his house seething, my blood boiling with rage. But deep down, there was grim satisfaction. He hadn't denied it outright. That hesitation, that flicker of guilt, it was enough to keep me going. The next few days were spent in a relentless search. I dug through every detail of Grant's and Nina's lives, old photos, receipts, even social media posts. I wasn't going to stop until I had proof. And then I found it. A photo from over 20 years ago, taken at a family barbecue. Nina stood next to Grant, her body angled toward him in a way that felt far too intimate for a stepfather and stepdaughter. But it wasn't the pose that stopped me. It was the date. The photo had been taken 9 months before Chloe was born. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen. It was circumstantial evidence, sure. Combined with everything else, it painted a damning picture. I saved the image, filing it away with the rest of my evidence. I wasn't done yet. If I was going to confront Nina, I needed to leave her with no way out. That evening, I waited for her to come home. She walked in around 7 p.m., looking tired but composed. "Hey," she said cautiously, sensing the tension in the air. "Sit down," I said, my voice cold. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of nervousness. "What's this about?" I placed the DNA results and the photo on the table between us. "Explain this," I said simply. Nina's face drained of color. She stared at the papers for a long moment before finally meeting my gaze. "Evan, don't lie." I cut her off sharply. "I've already done the math, Nina. What I want now is the truth. How long has this been going on?" Her lips trembled, and for a brief moment, I thought she might actually come clean. But then, true to form, she went on the defensive. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, her voice shaky with forced indignation. "Grant and there's nothing." "Don't." I slammed my fist on the table, cutting her off again. "Don't insult me by pretending I'm an idiot. I've given you every chance to come clean. You've done nothing but lie to my face. So let me make this clear. I will find out the full truth. And when I do, you'll wish you told me yourself." Her face crumpled, but I didn't wait for her to respond. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her alone with the evidence of her betrayal. This wasn't just about answers anymore. It was about justice. The confrontation with Nina left me cold, but not broken. Her denial wasn't just weak. It was desperate. And that told me everything I needed to know. She was scared, not because she was innocent, but because she knew the walls were closing in. I couldn't stop there. I would. If Grant and Nina thought they could bury the truth under a pile of lies and manipulation, they were about to learn how wrong they were. The next step in my plan was risky, but necessary. I needed to get close to Chloe again without letting my suspicion show. She was the key to uncovering the full truth. Not just because she deserved it, because she might unknowingly hold pieces of their cover-up. A week after confronting Nina, I called Chloe under the guise of wanting to spend time together. We hadn't spoken much since her wedding, and I could sense something weighing on her when she picked up. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice hesitant. "What's up?" "Just thought we could grab lunch or something," I said casually. "It's been a while." There was a pause on the other end. For a moment, I thought she might decline. Then she sighed. "Yeah, sure. That sounds nice." We met at a small cafe downtown, one of her favorite spots. She looked tired, like the stress of post-wedding life was already catching up to her. Or maybe she picked up on the tension between Nina and me. "How's married life treating you?" I asked once we were seated. She smiled faintly, stirring her coffee. "Good. Busy. Timothy and I are still settling into the new apartment." I nodded, keeping the conversation light and easy at first. But as the moment felt right, I carefully steered it toward the real reason I'd asked to see her. "Your mom and I have been having some issues," I said, keeping my tone measured. Chloe frowned, concern flickering in her eyes. "What kind of issues?" I hesitated, as though deciding how much to share. "It's complicated," I said slowly. "I just feel like there are things she hasn't been honest about. Things involving your grandfather, Grant." Her frown deepened. "What do you mean?" "You know how close they've always been," I said, leaning in slightly. "Has she ever said anything to you about their relationship? Anything that seemed unusual?" Chloe's eyes widened slightly, and for just a moment, I saw a flicker of recognition. She glanced down at her coffee, avoiding my gaze. "Dad, what's going on? Why are you asking me this?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself, because I need to know if there's something she's keeping from me. "From us." Chloe sat silently for a long moment, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her cup. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "I don't know anything for sure, but..." She trailed off, biting her lip. "But what?" I pressed gently. She looked up at me, her expression hesitant. "There were times growing up when it felt like Grandpa Grant treated me differently," she admitted. "Not in a bad way, just different. He was always so involved, almost more than you or Mom. It felt like he cared about everything I did. Sometimes too much." Her words cut through me like a knife. I fought to keep my face neutral, but inside, I was seething. "Did he ever say anything? Do anything that made you uncomfortable?" I asked. "No," she replied quickly. "Nothing like that. But there was this one time." She hesitated, her brow furrowing as if she were still trying to process the memory. "What time?" I asked, my voice calm but insistent. "When I was about 16, I overheard him and Mom arguing in the kitchen," Chloe said. "I couldn't hear everything, but he kept saying something about protecting truth. Mom told him to lower his voice, that I might hear them. When I asked her about later, she just said it was about family stuff. Nothing for me to worry about." My jaw clenched, and a fresh wave of anger washed over me. Nina had been lying to protect Grant for years, keeping both Chloe and me in the dark. "Chloe," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "I need you to trust me on this. There's something I'm trying to figure out, and I think it's important for both of us. If you remember anything else, anything that seems strange, you tell me?" She nodded, her face full of concern. "Of course, Dad. But are you okay? You seem different lately." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just trying to sort some things out." We finished lunch, and as I walked her to her car, I felt a mix of guilt and determination. I hated dragging her into this mess, but if there was one thing I was certain of, it was that Chloe deserved the truth just as much as I did. That night, I sat in my office, staring at the picture of Grant and Nina at the barbecue. The pieces were starting to come together, but I needed something more, a final, undeniable piece of evidence. And then it hit me. Grant wasn't just smug. He was arrogant. People like him always left something behind, some clue they thought they'd hidden well enough. I knew I had to find it. With that thought, I began strategizing my next move. It was time to dig deeper, go beyond the surface and uncover everything they'd been hiding. Nina and Grant had already taken so much from me, and now it was my turn to reclaim something. I wasn't about to let them win. They'd built their web of lies on my back, stolen years of my life, and turned me into a pawn in their twisted game. But I wasn't the same man I had been at the wedding. No more blind trust. No more excuses. It was time to bring their whole facade crashing down. The first step was to infiltrate Grant's world. If he'd been arrogant enough to let something slip at the wedding, there had to be more. Texts, emails, something that tied him and Nina together in ways they couldn't deny. I just needed access. A week later, I saw my chance. Grant was hosting a small family gathering at his house, a belated wedding celebration for Chloe and Timothy. Nina insisted I attend, probably to maintain appearances. She was doing everything she could to act like nothing was wrong, as if the cracks in our marriage weren't threatening to consume us. I played along. The gathering was exactly what I expected. Polite small talk, drinks flowing a little too freely, and Grant playing the role of the charming patriarch. But my focus wasn't on the party. It was on Grant's office. After an hour of feigning interest in boring conversations, I excused myself, pretending I needed to make a work call. Grant's office was down the hall, tucked behind a closed door. This was my moment. The door wasn't locked, so I slipped inside, closing it quietly behind me. The room was spotless, bookshelves filled with dusty hardcovers, a pristine desk, and a laptop sitting in the center. My heart raced as I sat down and powered it on. Of course, the laptop required a password. Grant's arrogance played in my favor. A sticky note tucked under the keyboard had the password written in plain sight. Grant 2021. I typed it in, and the desktop appeared immediately. I went straight for his email, not expecting to find much. People like Grant didn't leave obvious evidence lying around. But then, in the sent folder, I stumbled upon a chain of emails that made my stomach twist. The subject line was simply E, and though the messages weren't explicit, they didn't need to be. They were filled with phrases like, "We can't let him find out, it's better this way," and "Our secret is safe." The dates aligned perfectly with key events in Chloe's life. Her first day of school, graduation, and even the wedding. One email in particular stood out. It was sent just weeks before the wedding, addressed to Nina. The message began, "I've been thinking about the toast. Are you sure this is a good idea? Ev isn't stupid. If connects the dots, this could all blow up in our faces." Nina's reply was brief, yet chilling. "Stick to the plan. He won't suspect a thing." My hands trembled as I read the words. The toast wasn't some slip-up. It had been a deliberate move, a calculated blend of arrogance and carelessness that they thought I would let slide. Before I could dig deeper, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart raced as the doorknob began to turn. The door creaked open, and there stood Grant. His eyes quickly assessed the situation, narrowing as they fixed on me sitting at his desk, his laptop wide open in front of me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The tension so thick, I felt like the walls might collapse under the weight of it. "What the hell are you doing, Evan?" he asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Find the truth," I replied, standing up slowly. Grant stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. His expression shifted, no longer the friendly, charming persona he usually wore. This was the real Grant, cold, calculating, and dangerous. "You shouldn't have done that," he said, his voice low, menacing. "I shouldn't have trusted you." I shot back, my tone steady. "But that's over now. I know everything." Grant's laughter was quiet but bitter, like the sound of something breaking. "You don't know anything. All you have are suspicions and half-truths. You can't prove a damn thing." I smirked and held up my phone. "I don't need to. I've got enough right here to ruin you." For the first time, I saw Grant's composure crack. His jaw tightened, and his eyes flicked toward the laptop. "You think you're clever, don't you?" "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm just done being your fool." Grant lunged for the laptop, but I was quicker. I slammed the lid shut and grabbed the device off the desk, tucking it under my arm. "This ends tonight," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Nina, Chloe, they're going to know exactly who you are." Grant's face twisted in rage, but he didn't stop me as I walked past him and out of the office. The party was still in full swing, oblivious to the storm unfolding just down the hall. As I left the house, my resolve hardened. Nina and Grant had thought they could bury truth, but they had underestimated me. Now, I had everything I needed to tear them apart. I didn't sleep that night, but this time it wasn't from doubt or confusion. It was the adrenaline, the raw fury surging through me as I replayed everything I had uncovered. The emails, the timing, the lies. They all painted a picture so vivid it felt like a slap to the face. Grant and Nina had been in this together from the very beginning. Every moment of my life that they had touched now felt tainted. Every laugh, every hug, every shared memory with Chloe. They were all stained by their betrayal. But if they thought I was going to crumble, they were sorely mistaken. The next morning, I made my move. I didn't reach out to Nina, Chloe. I needed to approach this strategically to ensure the truth came out in a way that left no room for denial or manipulation. I started by contacting Chloe's husband, Timothy. "Hey, Timothy," I said when he picked up. "I need your help with something." Timothy sounded surprised but not unwilling. "Sure, Evan. What's going on?" "It's about Chloe," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "There's something I need to talk to her about, something big, but I want you there when I do." Timothy hesitated, but concern edged his voice. "Okay, when?" "Tonight. Can you both come over to the house?" "Of course," he said. "We'll be there." That evening, I was ready. I had the DNA results printed, emails from Grant saved on a flash drive, the photo from the barbecue framed and sitting on the table, a damning centerpiece. When Chloe and Timothy arrived, Nina was already home, sitting stiffly on the couch. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. "What's this about, Dad?" Chloe asked, her voice a mixture of confusion and concern. "Sit down," I said, motioning to the chairs across from me. Chloe and Timothy exchanged glances before sitting. Nina remained silent, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of the couch. "This is about the truth," I began, my eyes locked on Nina. "Something your mother has been hiding from all of us for years." "Evan, don't do this," Nina whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm done protecting you," I snapped, never breaking eye contact. "You've had your chance to come clean. Now it's my turn." I turned to Chloe, my heart heavy with what I had to say. "Chloe, I need you to know something. I love you. That will never change, no matter what. But there's something I found out recently that you deserve to know." Her brow furrowed, confusion giving way to concern. "What are you talking about?" I handed her the DNA results, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I'm not your biological father." The room fell into silence. Chloe's eyes scanned the paper, her hands trembling as she read the words. This can't be right," she whispered. "It is," I said quietly. "I've known for weeks, and that's not all." I picked up a framed photo and handed it to her. "This was taken 9 months before you were born. Your mother and Grant were already closer than they should have been." Nina allowed a sharp breath, her voice shaking. "Evan, stop it. You don't have to do this." I ignored her, pulling out the flash drive and plugging into the laptop I had set up on the coffee table. I opened the folder and said, "And here are the emails, showing the correspondence between Nina and Grant. They were planning how to keep this secret, even after all these years." Timothy leaned forward, his face a mask of disbelief. Chloe sat frozen, tears streaming down her face as the truth sank in. Nina finally cracked. "I did it for us," she cried, her voice frantic. "For our family. I didn't want to hurt anyone. For us." I repeated, my voice sharp and bitter. "You did it for yourself. You lied to me, to Chloe, to everyone. You used me to cover your shame." "Mom," Chloe choked out, her voice trembling. "Is this true? Is he my father?" Nina's face crumpled. She buried her head in her hands, sobbing. She didn't need to answer. Her silence spoke volumes. Chloe stood up suddenly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't believe this," she said, her voice breaking. "You lied to me my entire life. Both of you." She turned to Timothy, tears streaming down her face. "We have to go." "Chloe, wait." Nina called after her, but it was too late. Chloe stormed out, Timothy close behind her. I watched them leave, my heart breaking into a million pieces. But as the door slammed behind them, I turned back to Nina. "You've destroyed everything," I said coldly. Nina looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. "You don't get to play the victim," I snapped, standing over her. "This is just the beginning, Nina. You and Grant think you can get away with this? Watch me." The first time, real fear flashed in her eyes. Without saying another word, I walked out of the room, leaving her alone with the mess she had created. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. This wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about making them feel every ounce of pain they had caused me. And I wouldn't stop until they did. After Chloe stormed out, the house was eerily silent, broken only by Nina's quiet sobs. I felt no sympathy for her. Not anymore. She had shattered everything we had built together. And for what? To protect her secret with Grant? To cling to the illusion of a happy family? The fallout wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I received a call from Timothy. Timothy's voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of anger and confusion. Evan, he began. Chloe's devastated. She doesn't know what to believe right now. I told her to take a day, breathe, and then figure out what to do next. But I need to ask you, is it true about Grant? It's true, I replied firmly. Every word of it. I wouldn't have told her if I wasn't absolutely sure. Timothy sighed heavily on the other end. She's asking a lot of questions about her mom, about her real father. I think she wants to confront Grant. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Chloe shouldn't have to face Grant directly. But maybe this was it. The final piece of the puzzle. The moment Grant's lies would finally come crashing down. Let her, I said after a pause. She deserves to hear the truth from him, and I'll be there when she does. Timothy hesitated, but eventually agreed. Okay, I'll talk to her and let you know. The meeting was set for that evening. Chloe wanted answers. She wanted them face-to-face with Grant and Nina. She insisted I come, though I could tell she wasn't sure what role I would play in this unfolding drama. Grant, as expected, tried to avoid the meeting. When Chloe called him, he claimed to be too busy, but her anger broke through his excuses. You owe me the truth, she said, her voice trembling. You've owed me that my whole life. Grant finally gave in. We met at his house, a neutral setting, but it felt anything but. Nina and Chloe sat on one side of the living room, Timothy and I on the other. Grant stood near the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in hand. His usual arrogance was still there, but I could see the cracks in his facade. Chloe didn't waste any time. Are you my father? She asked, her voice shaking but resolute. Grant looked at Nina, then back at Chloe. For a moment, he seemed to struggle with himself. But then, with a sigh, he sat down and placed his glass on the table. Yes, he said simply. The room seemed to freeze. Nina let out a quiet sob, but Chloe wasn't looking at her. Her eyes were fixed on Grant, wide with a mix of horror and disbelief. How could you? She whispered. You lied to me. My whole life. You lied to me. I didn't want to hurt you, Grant replied, his tone almost condescending. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Then how was it supposed to happen? She snapped, her voice rising. Were you ever going to tell me? Or was I just supposed to keep living a lie? Nina tried to intervene, but Chloe silenced her with a sharp glare. Don't say a word. You're just as guilty as he is. The tension in the room was suffocating. My heart ached for Chloe, but I knew this was her moment. She needed to face them on her own terms. You used Dad, she said, her voice cracking. You used him to raise me, to pay for everything, to be the father you couldn't be. And you, she turned toward Nina, you let him. You let him steal everything from Dad. Nina's sobs grew louder, but Chloe wasn't finished. I don't even know who I am anymore, she continued, tears streaming down her face. Everything I thought I knew about my family, it's all gone. You took that from me. Grant attempted to defend himself, but I stood up and cut him off. Save it, I said coldly. You've done enough damage. Grant glared at me, his composure beginning to crumble. And what are you going to do, Evan? He sneered. Ruin the family? Destroy everything over this? I stepped closer, towering over him. You already destroyed everything. But don't worry, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Grant paled, his bravado faltering. You wouldn't dare, he muttered. Oh, I would, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Suddenly, Chloe stood up, the sound of her chair scraping across the floor echoing through the room. I'm done, she said, her voice trembling. I don't want anything to do with either of you. She turned to me, her eyes full of pain. Can we go? Of course, I replied softly. As we walked out, leaving Nina and Grant behind in their guilt and silence, a strange mix of emotions filled me. I felt sadness for Chloe, belief that the truth was finally out, and a growing sense of determination. This wasn't over. Nina and Grant had taken years of my life, stolen family, and shattered my trust. But now, I had the truth, and I was going to make sure they never hurt anyone again. My revenge was just beginning. Leaving Grant's house didn't feel like closure. It felt like the first strike in a war that had been building for decades. The truth had come out, but that wasn't enough. Not yet. Chloe was devastated. Timothy was furious. And Nina? Nina was coming apart as seams. I could see it in her wild eyes and trembling hands as she called out, begging Chloe to talk to her, give her a chance to explain. but some betrayals are too deep for words. On the drive home, Chloe was silent, staring out the window with tears glistening on her cheeks. I didn't push her. What could I say that wouldn't sound empty? That I was sorry? That I should have known? Nothing could undo the pain she was feeling. When we pulled into their driveway, Timothy turned to me, his face somber. "Thank you for being there tonight," he said. I nodded. "Take care of her." Chloe didn't speak as she got out of the car, but before closing the door, she hesitated and looked back at me. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. Her words hit me harder than any betrayal. "You don't need to apologize for anything," I said, my voice breaking. "This isn't your fault," I said softly. Chloe nodded faintly before turning and walking into the house. I sat in the car for a long while, my eyes fixed on the dark street ahead. The weight of everything pressed down on me like a heavy blanket, but beneath it, a seething anger was rising. Grant and Nina had shattered my family, my trust, and Chloe's sense of who she was. They had used me as a pawn in their twisted game, and now they would pay. The next morning, I began putting my plan into action. I wasn't looking for just any revenge. I wanted something deliberate, something that would hit them where it hurt the most. Step 1. Nina. She was the mastermind behind the lies, the one who had carefully integrated Grant into our lives while keeping me in the dark. She had manipulated me, betrayed me, and let me pour my heart and soul into a family built on falsehoods. There was no way she's going to walk away unscathed. I started collecting every piece of financial information I could find. Joint accounts, credit cards, savings. I knew Nina had been siphoning money for years, using family emergencies that always seemed to coincide with Grant's needs. I documented everything, created a timeline of her spin that painted a damning picture. Next, I contacted a divorce lawyer, one recommended by a friend who'd been through a particularly brutal split. I laid everything out for him. The DNA results, the emails, the financial discrepancies. He listened carefully, his eyes narrowing as he took notes. "This is going to get ugly," he said when I finished. "Good," I replied, my voice steely. The lawyer smirked slightly. "Then let's get to work." Step 2. Grant. He thought his arrogance would protect him, but he underestimated just how much leverage I had now. The emails alone were enough to destroy him, but I wasn't stopping there. Grant was a respected community leader, chairman of several boards, a generous donor, and a regular at every networking event. But behind the polished image was a man who had spent years manipulating those closest to him. I started small, anonymously forwarding a few of the less damaging emails to influential figures in the community, just enough to cast doubt on his integrity. Then, I dug deeper, compiling a comprehensive dossier of his financial dealings. I uncovered questionable donations, shady agreements that would sit well with the organizations he was involved with. I didn't release it all at once, too easy. Instead, I leaked it bit by bit, letting the scandal grow, feeding it to the right people until Grant's reputation was in shambles. The final blow came when I confronted Grant at a public charity gala. He didn't see it coming, too absorbed in charming the local elite. "Having a good time?" I asked, stepping into his line of sight. Grant froze, his face draining color as he recognized me. "Evan," he said, his voice tight. "What are you doing here?" I smiled, holding up a small envelope. "Just thought you'd want a copy of this. It's a full breakdown of your donations. I'm sure the IRS will find it fascinating." Panic flashed in his eyes, and his composure cracked. "You wouldn't." "Oh, I already did." I cut him off, my tongue cold. "You think you can destroy my family and just walk away?" "Think again." He didn't respond, just stood there, a mask of fury and humiliation, while I walked away, leaving him to face the inevitable fallout. In the week that followed, everything fell apart for Nina and Grant. The divorce papers hit Nina like a ton of bricks, and the financial records left her with no ground to stand on. She tried to plead, to negotiate, but I refused to relent. Meanwhile, Grant became a pariah. His reputation was shredded, his finances examined, and his connections severed. The once proud patriarch was now just a disgraced figure, left to pick up the pieces of a life he had destroyed. Chloe pulled away from both of them, leaning on Timothy and me for support. She was still processing everything, but I could see her regaining her strength, little by little. As for me, I wasn't the same man I had been at that wedding. I'd lost so much, but in the process, I had gained something far more valuable: clarity. Nina and Grant had thought they could strip everything from me and walk away unscathed. They were wrong. Their lives were in ruins, but I didn't feel a sense of triumph. Revenge wasn't the glorious, satisfying crescendo that movies depict. It was cold, hollow, and, ultimately, necessary. The divorce was finalized within a few months. Nina walked away with little more than clothes on her back and a small fraction of our savings, just enough to keep the courts off my back. I kept the house, the cars, and, most importantly, my dignity. Grant, meanwhile, slinked out of the community, his reputation beyond repair. Chloe and I began to rebuild, step by step. She completely cut off Nina and refused to acknowledge that. Timothy remained steady support for her, and I was grateful she had someone like him to lean on. But the scars were deep, and healing wasn't going to be easy or quick. A few months after the storm had calmed, Chloe and I sat together on the back porch of my house, watching the sunset filter through the trees. It was the first time in weeks that she seemed truly at peace. "I still don't know who I am," she said softly, breaking the quiet. I turned to her, the weight of her words pressing on me. "You're Chloe," I replied. "You're kind, smart, strong, and brave. You're everything I hoped you'd be, and none of that has changed." She looked at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I feel lost, like my whole life was a lie." "It wasn't a lie," I said gently. "Not all of it. The love we shared, the memories we made, those were real. Just because you found out the truth about where you came from doesn't mean everything else was fake." She nodded slowly, taking in my words. "And you? How do you feel about all of this?" I leaned back in my chair, gazing at the horizon. "Angry sometimes, hurt, but mostly grateful." "Grateful?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "For you," I said simply. "For the chance to raise you, to love you, to watch you grow into the incredible woman you are. Biology doesn't change that. It never will." Her tears spilled over, and she reached for my hand, holding it tightly. "You'll always be my dad," she whispered. "And you'll always be my daughter," I replied, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. In the months that followed, I found myself reflecting on the lessons this ordeal had taught me. Betrayal is a wound that cuts deep, but it also exposed truths you might never have seen otherwise. It showed me who I could trust and who I couldn't. To any man who might find himself in my position, my advice is this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't ignore it. Silence and doubt only grow. Fight for the truth, even if it hurts, even if it changes everything. The truth is always worth knowing. Love isn't always about blood. Family is built on the bonds you create, not just the ones you're born into. I lost a lot, but I gained clarity and a deeper understanding of what truly matters. It's the people who choose to stand by you, not out of obligation, but because they love you for who you are. Revenge might have fueled me, but love was the foundation that helped me rebuild. In the end, that was what mattered most. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe.